And I just turned around and I hauled ass out of there. I was done. I wasn't dealing with that.
The hypocrisy of the cult is one of the things that turned me away the quickest.
When I turned my headlights on, it turned and looked at us. And one of the things I remember the most were the eyes were glowing red.
I see an orb of light. It is just circling these steps like it is waiting for me.
And he begins to tell them that he saw a UFO. They're basically like, what are you talking about? That's 7 foot up on a tree, peeking around it, and that's where I saw the top of the muzzle, nose, and the eyes. As soon as I made eye contact with this thing, it felt like death.
Welcome back to Tinfoil Tales. I'm your host, Brandon. Tonight we're joined by my guest, Wes. Wes, thanks for coming on here and talking with me.
Hey, Brandon, thanks for having me on the show. It's a privilege. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Would you like to let the audience know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I live in Virginia Beach. I've got a podcast called Enlightenment Unknown: Life of a Spiritual Nomad. A friend of mine encouraged me to start that podcast and tell a story. It happened to me in, I guess it was 2019. So we talk about this extraordinary paranormal experience that I went through for almost a year.
Well, if you would like to share that on here, I definitely want to hear about it.
Yeah, man. Well, there's lots of moving parts. I think it was, I think we recorded about 15, 16 hours of it. But basically what happened is I bought this house and, in my mind, I was going to marry this girl. We were going to adopt her nephew. And when we moved in the house, we moved the swimming pool. And whatever was in the ground where the swimming pool was unlocked something. The house started to act weird. In some of the scary movies, if there's a scene and all of a sudden like the hallway gets longer, if when she and I would start arguing, that would happen. It was really bizarre. I didn't realize that schizophrenia was turning on for her. It was on her father's side of the family. So when we moved in the house, of course, the person I was dating quickly became somebody I didn't know. And so there was a lot of arguments and stuff in the house. And you would start hearing music in the walls. It was creepy. It was like 1920s music. And if you put your ear against the wall, you couldn't hear it. But if you're sitting in the chair about a foot from the wall, you could hear it. And, long story short, she was gone. She moved out of the house. And I was sitting in the bedroom one evening with my dogs. I was eating an ice cream sandwich. And about 10 o'clock at night, you heard this lion's roar down in the dining room. I mean, nobody could have created that sound. A human could not have made it that loud. A human could not have done that. And in my mind, Brandon, I was like, hey, dogs, go be dogs. And, they didn't go. So I went downstairs with my weapon. And as I came around the corner, there was this demon there. It was like somebody took 50 pounds of shaved black chalk and threw it in the air. You can see its eyes, its horns, and frankly, I think it was as startled to see me as I was to see it. So as I backed up, it ran upstairs, and one of the dogs was a German Shepherd, and the other was a Yorkie, and the Yorkie barked at it, and I couldn't find it after that. But the house was goofy prior to that, Brandon, but after this, the paranormal stuff in that place just started going nuts. You would close the bedroom door and you clearly see people walking by, but with the security camera I bought on the other side of the bedroom door, there's nothing there. And I don't know, I guess that lasted for a couple weeks, and then one evening, the lights down in the dining room were flickering. So it had, those Edison bulbs, those little 40-watt bulbs you could put in your dining room.
Yeah.
It's enough to see something, but that's about it. Well, whatever was there was making that light bulb look like, I mean, it was brighter than the headlight in your truck. So Yeah, I went downstairs, me being me, and I was like, "Hey, this is a house of effing God," and cut the crap, and I turned the light switch off. And I don't even know why I said that about God. I just that was not my vocabulary back then. But the second I did, you could feel an energy in that house, an anger. And I mean, it's like it bled through the walls. It was the most bizarre experience. And one of the things that started happening in the house when it got really demonic in the house, the lights in the kitchen would turn blue. Have you ever heard of that?
Not blue, but I've heard of the lights like flickering and stuff, but never changing color.
Yeah, man, this thing turned blue. Never did figure that out. I mean, there's not a blue light bulb in the light, right?
Hmm.
So, I started heading upstairs and I started looking around and there's this fog started to appear, this mist, and I'm like, man, what is going on? So I went into the bedroom. It was a big house. It had two doors going into the master bedroom that were 3 feet wide. And with the doors closed, you could see the light around, around the sides of the door, right? So you could see that coming through. And by the time I got up there, I was so creeped out. I closed the door and I had some string and I tied the door shut. And as I backed up and I was sitting on the bed just watching, and all of a sudden you can hear music. There was a party in the other side on the other side of the door. It was like a 1920s party. There's people talking. You could clearly hear multiple people walking up and down the stairs. And when I'm looking on the security cameras through the house, there's nothing there, but you could see where this fog was getting thicker and thicker. And I don't know, that lasted a couple minutes. So I'm texting some friends. They're like, hey, call the cops. I'm like, okay, hey, Brandon, call the cops, see if we, go to the nut house tonight. so, but about that time, I don't know what was walking down the hallway, but something, I'm 230 pounds, 6'1", and I couldn't afterwards jump up and down and stomp to get the same effect that whatever was walking down the hall was shaking the entire upstairs. And so it came down the hallway and you could hear it where it's like its feet came together. You could tell it turned facing my door. And so I'm looking at the security camera and you don't see anything on the other side of the door, but on my side of the door, the light around the frame of the door was solid black. I mean, there was no light coming through whatsoever. And I'm like, man, what in the world? Yeah, dude, I was panicked at that time. I mean, at this point, it had probably been about a month and a half of weird stuff. We had some people come over and they blessed the house. And when we were doing that, you could hear every single window in the house tap, like something was tapping to get out. And so we would open all the windows and you would hear it. It's like, the windows cranked out. So you would hear it tapping on the way out. And, dude, it was just super bizarre. So my friends are like, this can't be real. You need to call the police. And, I sat there and I said, I'm a retired Marine. I said, F this, I'm going to take care of it myself. And as the second I said that and I grabbed my weapon again, whatever that was kicked the door and had the string not been tied on there is like a parachute rope. That door would have came flying open. And I'm like, hey man, I'm gonna wait 5 minutes before I beat your ass. All right. So I mean, I was clearly shaken and yeah, I just didn't know what to do. So, you know, my human mind said, oh, there's an electrical fire. That's what the smoke is. The other stuff, I don't know, but that fog or whatever is smoke. And so I untied the door, and when I did, I stepped into the hallway and it felt like it's below zero. I've never been so cold instantly in my life, shivering from head to toe. And I ski in shorts, so I don't get cold. But I was instantly shaking, and the whole upstairs was basically filled with this fog, and in the center of the fog, it was like, I don't know, it was like, it was swirling. There was like a thunderstorm is what it looked like in the center of it, just swirling really slow. And so I stepped back in the bedroom. I'm like, dude, man, I don't know what's going on, but yeah, I'm in trouble. So I tied the door, and when I stepped back into the room, I realized something came in the room with me because as I'm standing there, yeah, there's like this wind blowing in my face, like something was screaming at me. But I mean, the ceiling fan wasn't on. There was no wind in the bedroom. And I remember how startled I was, and I stepped back, and I probably cussed at it and told it to get off me, and it's like it made it more angry, and then it just came at me, and it was I kind of keep fairly short hair. My hair was blowing. And I remember how strange that was. My hair doesn't really blow unless it's the car windows down or something. And when we moved into the house, I could feel my mom all the time in there. And when her nephew would come over and play, we would take pictures, and you would see like these little distorted like orbs or whatever next to his head. And so I knew my mom was there, and I just felt her presence. And I remember I started to cry. And I said, Mom, I said, I know you're scared, because as the house got darker, the less I felt her. It was almost like she was going in this hole. And I said, Brandon, I said, I pleaded with her. I said, you've got to help me. And instantly, whatever's blowing was just gone, just gone. And the door didn't have to be open or anything like that, but it was just gone out of the room. So I went over to the side of the bed, and yeah, I mean, I was just sobbing. I was just so freaking scared. And I felt this cold on my left shoulder, and I jumped. And when my mom was alive, she would rub your shoulder and give you a kiss on your temple if you're sad. And that's what I felt. That's where the coldness was on both of those. So I know my mom helped me, and she stayed, and she pushed whatever that was out. And so this went on for like probably 25 minutes. And so I'm looking at the security cameras. Um, the entire upstairs, the security camera couldn't even see the door anymore. The fog was so thick. And, I wasn't going to call the cops. I mean, that would have been, that'd been crazy, man. But, so I decided I was going to go downstairs and turn that light back on, but I wasn't going to bring my dog through the fog. And so I contemplated taking my weapon with me. I'm like, what, this isn't human, whatever it is. So I left my weapon on the bed, and running, and because I ran fast, dude. Running down those stairs through that hallway and not being able to see 6 inches in front of you was terrifying. I didn't know what was going to be there. And when I got downstairs, I turned the light on in that dining room, and instantly it was so bright you couldn't see anything. And so I ran back upstairs, and probably within about 7 to 10 minutes, all the fog was gone. And so I grabbed my dog, my weapon, and three ice cream sandwiches, my keys to the camper, and I started sleeping in the camper. But that was the night that things started to get crazy. But this lasted 9, 10 months, and there was a couple exorcisms I had to go through. There was a Native American rebirthing ceremony where I had to dig my own grave and energetically die, and then I was reborn trying to fix this stuff. The priest comes to the house, and I'm picked up and thrown against the wall in front of, well, thrown backwards like at a 45-degree angle to the ceiling up against the wall in front of 6 people. And, it was like every single day it got more and more bizarre, more crazy. Um, and, I could tell you, I wouldn't recommend it, and I wouldn't want to go through it again. I've never been scared. Well, yeah, you go into combat and you're scared. You're scared to get married. You're scared you're going to be, your child's coming. It's scary being a parent. But this is a level of fear that seeps into your bones that you can't control. You're shaking. It was that bad, and it was just, there's so many different ways I could talk about in the story. Something crawling down my throat at one point, you know, um, helping these slaves cross over that had been there. We figured that we came to the conclusion as best we could that there was a slave ship that had docked where my house was. That was actually an old um, port there at one point, that we believe that there were slaves taken from Africa that had died on the ship and they just threw in a hole. And when we opened the swimming pool, it created some kind of portal or something that allowed all this demonic energy to come out. And yeah, it was a lot, man. It was a lot.
They claim water can channel energy too, so with the pool and everything else, it could have been a way for them to feed off of it.
Yeah, there was a little fingerling of water back behind the house, and dude, that was bizarre. You go back there, and it would almost, like they have the tar pits in Los Angeles and stuff. It's like the water would bubble like that,
Hmm.
and I ended up meeting this healer, this lady named Sandra Grace Brooks. And dude, Sandra Grace always had a smile on her face, laughed all the time, but people went to her to be healed, and she did that work. I didn't understand what it was at the time, and we did a ceremony in the backyard trying to fix that. And one of the things that did happen is afterwards, the water didn't bubble and gurgle like it was before. Fish started to jump in there. It was, dude, every day was like, what in the world is happening at a level 10 every single day? But I think the worst night, the worst night of out of all of it, and that's saying something because there was so much. I had been living in the camper on the side yard. So the house was about 4,800 square foot, and the land was more wide than deep. And there's a little fingerling of water back there, and there's a detached garage. And, I was put in a swimming pool and, just trying to make it nice. And in my mind, that was going to be my last house I was gonna buy. So I wanted to do some cool things to it. And, so I'm living in the camper, and it was 4th of July weekend, and my family goes to the Outer Banks, North Carolina, for 2 weeks every year. So I was supposed to go on down for 3 days. And so I got somebody to watch my German Shepherd. At that time, the Yorkie had gone to live with her mom. And, we had done this big ceremony at the house a couple days before. But previous to that, I ended up talking to this woman from Madagascar. And, I was spending my days calling people trying to fix this stuff. And the lady wasn't nice, Brandon. She goes, "Look, you're too effing stupid for me to explain it to you. But every time you do a healing on the house, bless it or whatever, you're actually giving it more power." And, when she said that, that was right, because it was. I didn't really verbalize it before that, but it did. But, have you ever heard of that? I mean, have you ever come across that?
Of giving things power.
Yeah, so the house is haunted. You go in there and you're trying to fix the haunted house. It gets better for a couple of days, but then it comes back even more powerful.
Yeah, I don't know what the exact words are for it, but I've heard if you basically feed the energy by acknowledging it.
Hmm.
So if you're trying to get rid of it, you're giving it power by basically acknowledging that it's there.
Okay.
And depending on what type of entity this is or what type of energy it is, like it can grow stronger if you're not doing it properly. So it might leave, but it comes back and it's got more power because You fed into it, and now it's feeding off of that fear that you have of it.
Yeah. Well, maybe that's what it was. And so we did not listen to her warning. And we did this healing session, and 4th of July weekend was coming. So one of the things you could do is look at the security cameras. And if you're looking at the outside security cameras, everything on my property at night would vibrate like somebody is shaking their hand back and forth. But when you would see where the line of the property is, like where your house might be, the trees were perfectly normal. And you look in the house, and where clearly you should see a window, the energy flowing in there from these portals that were coming in the house was so intense you couldn't even see the window. And so there was like 4 or 5 portals like bringing stuff in. So I think it was kind of like there was portals bringing souls in, and these demonic energies were feeding off of them, and the house was getting more and more and more powerful. So I head down to the Outer Banks for 3 days, and I get down there, and I'm just fixated at staring at my phone, looking at the security camera, seeing what's going on in the house. And I quickly realized that that extra ceremony we did, previous to that, you could stand in the yard and you were fine. You could stand in the garage, you were fine. But if you went in the house, you could feel it, you could see them. And one of the things that would happen if I go in the house, all I would think about was doing drugs and killing myself. And I would step across that threshold, and those thoughts would be gone. So I did not like to go in the house. And but well, you could tell that it was basically for the most part contained in in the home at that time. And but that weekend, when I was looking at the cameras, that's when I seen the trees and stuff shaking for the very first time. So I realized what we did made it so powerful that it was able to leave the confines of the house and take over the property. So I'm like, all right, well, that kind of was stressing me out a good bit. So I left the next morning really early because I wanted to go. I wanted to get the camper off the property, and I needed to find somewhere to stay. And so I got home and messed around for a little bit, but I ended up staying in a hotel that night. And when I was getting dressed and stuff, I realized that the demons, this is the first time the demons were able to follow me. And yeah, I just felt them in the room, and I could you take a picture with your cell phone, and you see these horrible faces in the corners of the walls. So, it was Virginia Beach, July 4th weekend, and went down to the beach, hung out with my friends, came back to the room probably 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. And, I went to sleep. And have you ever experienced sleep paralysis?
Yeah, I get it every once in a while.
Yeah. One of the things that I found that really helps me not have that is prayers. I just say, you know, ask my angels, will you wrap me and protect me while I sleep, or something like that. And it tends to really do well for me. But I went to sleep, and somewhere through the night, I woke up with that sleep paralysis. And, at some point in my mind, I said, Jesus Christ. And you got to remember, man, I didn't grow up in the church. I didn't know anything about the church. I didn't know anything about Jesus. I didn't want to know anything about Jesus. I was molested as a kid. And in my mind, if that dude was real, he's gonna save me or something. So, I had a lot of anger there over that. And, but the second I said that, it released me. And I took this giant gasp of air. And as I did, whatever was in the room pried my mouth open and started to crawl down my throat. I could feel, the muscles being stretched and the bones of my chest cracking. You could feel it. You could feel it moving the organs. And I remember being so, so terrified. and just I was just sitting there crying, and I've never been so alone before. Yeah, I'd already been months trying to get somebody to help me, and now something had crawled into my chest. You could, I was sleeping in a t-shirt, and you could see the t-shirt and the skin moving underneath of it, and it was an experience that I don't really know how to verbalize how bad that was. And I just remember sitting there sobbing. I was just freaking hysterically crying. I'm like, man, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And I'd never really prayed before. And I just started to pray. I just said, God, I said, yeah, I need you to help me, and I just sobbed and called to him over and over. And, you know, Jesus didn't come, Archangel Michael didn't come, these angels didn't come. But at some point, I'm laying in bed, and and you're in a hotel room, there's always like a little light in there so you can kind of see the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I still don't know what it is, but there was these like giant tic tacs about bigger than a football that started to slowly come down from the ceiling. It was the most bizarre thing, but it was the feeling of the room was, if you've ever been out in the woods and it's snowing, how it's like it's deafening silent.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, these things were floating down all around me, and I have no idea what they were. But the pain in my chest went away, and there was just this sense of, it was kind of like, hey man, we see you, we hear you, you're not alone. But they didn't save me. But that was enough. It was just, for the first time through this whole process, and this started in February. So, February, March, April, May, June, you're 5+ months into this thing, and you've got your first something coming down. And I never did figure out what that was. I have no idea, but I just remember I was watching it until I just couldn't keep my eyes open anymore, and I just fell asleep. And that was probably the worst night out of all of it. And there was a lot of bad nights. But, the it one of the things they did to me, as a little boy, I was molested. And, when that happens, your backside gets torn. And they had the unique ability to make it torn for like 9 months, and there was no reason why. And when this was happening that night, I could feel like rips in my skin. I had uh, like claw marks on my chest, and the level of, I guess, just, you know you're in the deepest victim energy you've ever experienced in your life, and you didn't know what to do, right? And from that night forward, they crawled on me like roaches every day. My eyes, my ears, everywhere. And that was relentless. That was, I looked like I was on drugs all the time, scratching and itching and trying to figure things out. And from that point on, every day just got worse, man. Just every day got worse. They wanted me dead. And that lady from Madagascar said she said she said, you cannot sleep in the house anymore because they'll kill you if you stay in the house. But they can't kill you outside, but they're going to try to get you to take your own life. And Yeah, I would love to say that wasn't a thought, but dude, I mean, every night for months, I'd sat in my bed with my 45 next to me trying to figure out, if we can't fix this, there's no way I was gonna be able to live like that. There's no way. I mean, how do I take my own life was my thought, not go to hell and not destroy my children. And thank God I didn't figure that out. But, every night I would just, I'd look at it, say, I could just grab it and just do it real quick. And I remember a friend of mine told me a long time ago that, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And, I'd say that over and over, over and over. I said, it's just a temporary problem. I didn't know what the solution was going to be. And, you know, it was, it was that bad. And, the funny thing, the best night that I had was probably in August. So at this time, we've been doing through tons of crazy stuff. I had been through one exorcism, which we can talk about if you like. There's another one that was going to happen, but through this, I kept asking for somebody to do an exorcism on the house. I didn't realize when I was touched as a child that something was placed inside me, which kind of made sense to me after I realized that was there. There's lots of pieces of my life that I'm like, that would make sense to me. And so Kennedy, my German Shepherd, and I were in my camper. And the honest answer is, dude, I was sitting there, I was probably 8 or 10 beers into a 12 pack. I'm like, what else am I going to do? It was like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I was miserable. I was itching. I was torn. My skin had cuts in it. I had sheets and blankets over all the mirrors in the RV because you think I would see things coming out of it, and there was demons. They're freaking everywhere in there. They're just everywhere. And my German Shepherd would look at them and look at me, look at them and look at me, and she was kind of like laying on my chest trying to protect me. And she was the best damn dog. And I was looking at that pistol. I was like, if I drank 2 or 3 more beers, I could probably do that tonight. And then I remember thinking, I'm like, well, I mean, what's going to happen to Kennedy? She's going to be in the middle of that mess, and those were my thoughts. That's where I was at, and it's funny. There was this one wall, and you see this demon. I mean, you literally seen its hands come through the wall, and it didn't literally rip the wallpaper, but it pulled it apart and stuck his head through, and it looked like fucking Roy Orbison. It did, the glasses and everything. I just looked at it and said, Roy, that's what happened there. And I looked at and Kennedy was just frustrated. And I got mad at her. I said, stick your head under the pillow because they can't kill you. And she goes, "Mm," and sticks her head under the pillow, and she went right to sleep. And that reminded me, you know, they can't kill me. So I was thinking, I remember I just started hysterically laughing because the pain that they were putting me through was nothing compared to what the Marine Corps did to me. There's this 1 day Marine Corps boot camp, this drill instructor. We were at Paris Island, South Carolina. The guy's name was Coughlin. And, I don't know if every unit had one that was just super psycho, but this guy, dude, I mean, those drill instructors are off the chain, but this guy was just to a next level, and we were terrified of him. And he was working a Saturday. So if he's working a Saturday, he got in trouble. And if he got in trouble, we're going to pay. And I remember he was taking us out and lining us up outside. And he said, I'm going to make you pay. you're undisciplined, you make me sick. I mean, the guy was just going off, and we're like 2 weeks away from graduating boot camp. And so he marches us back towards the swamp. And, there's certain areas that you just don't go. And we were going to an area that you weren't supposed to go. And we're going to an area that nobody's seen you. And I can promise you, I don't know what boot camp's like today, but boot camp in 1988, you did not want to go into an area with a drill instructor, especially this drill instructor, and there was nobody that could see what you're doing and where you're at and why you're there, because he would hurt you at a deep level. And he took us back there and lined us up by the swamp. And you got to remember, I mean, they freaked us out because it's down in South Carolina. They beat it in our head if we try to escape, we're going to get eaten by the alligators. So he said, "We're going to teach you discipline today, and we're going to stay here and we're going to watch you bleed until I get tired." And the sand fleas in Paris Island, those things you couldn't see them, but they bite you, and you're just there's just blood dripping off of us. And he had us there for hours, and he never moved. And I didn't realize it till a couple years ago. He probably had bug spray on. We're out there thinking he's all that, and he probably had bug spray on. I'm sure he did, but I thought that test was given to us. We're going to be Marines, we're going to be in combat. If you get captured, things happen. And at least in my mind, you wonder, how are you going to react going through that? How are you going to react when you're being tortured? And this was a part of that training. And he did that. I was thinking about that evening, that 30 some years earlier, God had this guy take us to the swamp, torture us, do things to us, for me not to survive being captured by the enemy, but for me to not pull the trigger in that camper and give up. And, so when you're looking at that and you're looking at all the different steps in your life and stuff, and, how everything seems to have just kind of fallen in place for you to become the person that you are. And, that was the last time, Robert, or excuse me, Robert, I'm thinking of my Uncle Robert, Brandon, that that was the last time I ever touched my weapon with the thoughts of harming myself. And that was the best night. It gave me a glimmer of hope, and we I think I still had a good month or so before, I was going to go up to Abington, Virginia. So I live in Virginia Beach, and if you look on the map of Virginia, it's on the coast where Carolina comes together down that little tip. Now in the Norfolk area, we were driving to Abington, Virginia, which is on the other side of Virginia, close to Tennessee, is where I met this Native American Lakota medicine woman, and she said that she could fix everything, but I had to wait till the summer was over to do it. So that was happening sometime early September. I was going up there for a Native American rebirthing ceremony. And so I still had a long way to go at that point.
Before we keep going into it, I had a couple questions. And
Mhm.
do you think this, you mentioned this has been going on you afterwards, like since you were a little boy.
Yep.
What do you think made it escalate to the point where it did now?
You know, maybe it was my destiny. One of the things that ended up happening through this process is, you know, not everybody could see the demons,
Mm-hmm.
right? I could see the demons, Sandra Grace could see the demons, some other people. I could clearly take a picture and you could see it. I mean, it was there. I mean, all my friends would look at the camera and they're like, dude, what is that? I'm like, right? So, there was scientific proof that it was there. And, when we went into this process, I didn't have any spiritual gifts. I didn't have, I wasn't a healer like Santa Grace. I didn't have all this intuition. You see people, they, have spiritual gifts, they're psychic or whatever. And, one of the things that was happening to me through that process, I think because of the trauma of it, is, these abilities were turning on, these psychic abilities are turning on, these healing abilities were turning on. So as you fast forward when it's over, and you fast forward to today, people come to me from all over the world right now, and I help them heal from pain and stuff. So I think, well, I know it was my destiny. And so I believe it was God calling me to the table, because if the burning bush showed up, Wesley, this is God. I'd have been like, dude, really? Are you freaking kidding me? Let's get the fire extinguisher. All right. So they showed me the demons and put me through that pain and broke me just like the Marine Corps did, for me to come to the realization. Because I'm like, well, if that's real, I mean, is that dude real? I mean, seriously, all this time I've thought the Bible was BS and God was BS. That dude's real. And so one of the things that was happening is these gifts were turning on. So, I could go up. I went and touched this this antique berry picker thing. It had like little, it was wood and it had like little fingers on it and a little catcher so you could run it up the branch and pick
Hmm.
berries. And I remember walking up to it, and when I touched it, I could taste the fruit. And I could touch a child's toy and I could see who was the little girl playing with the toy. And, I thought I was losing my mind. I'm like, I don't understand what's going on, but I was so traumatized by the whole experience and running from everything, trying to just stay alive. I didn't understand that these gifts were turning on. And you see where, somebody gets in a car accident and they're in a coma and they wake up and all of a sudden they've got psychic abilities, or they're speaking Dutch or something. And it was kind of one of those things. So, I think it was, I believe it was God calling me to the table, for me to move into this healing work that I do. So it's the last 5 6 years, dude, man, it's just been, the person I was is no longer here. And, you know, it just gets crazy. Things are just different. It's just different. I don't know if that answered that question or not.
The other thing I was wondering is, it seemed like it when you were at this place, like this house. Did you ever talk to anyone else that ever lived there prior?
Yeah, actually, yeah, I did. The night that that fog was there, a bunch of my friends, I've been telling my friends, dude, this house is haunted, and everybody's like, oh man, you're stupid. It's just what people do. And so I took a picture of the fog through the security camera. I said, hey guys, remember how I said the house is haunted? And I put that picture up there. Well, I didn't realize there was a girl that I was friends with on Facebook, and we went to high school together. Where her dad was the builder, and he built that house. And she said they lived there. So she hit me up, and she came over. So they lived there for a handful of years, and this other family lived there for like 18 or 20 years. And I wasn't going to go try to track these people down wherever they were and ask them questions. But the girl came with her sister, and they were really freaked out being in the house. And they were telling me all these stories where, it was a large house. So the dining room was probably 30 by 30, or the family room. And how the glass in the fireplace shattered, but it flew 30 feet across the room to hit the one girl in the face. I mean, how does that happen? I mean, that's a long way. And there wasn't even a fire. It's not like the fireplace was on. She said that it would get so hot that it exploded. It just exploded. And for some reason, that house, this sister was tormented more than the other sister. Um, and they said that the dad was really, really tormented. That when you go up the stairs, there's like a big balcony. And so if you kind of turn around to your left and go backwards, there's a big sitting area there. And that ended up being the hot spot of the house, ironically. But the girls said that their dad would sit there on a chair there all night long, night after night after night. And they just didn't understand what was going on with him. So I don't know if they were talking to him or he was being possessed or whatever. They didn't tell me what ended up happening with him. Um, I think he died on the steps somehow in that house. But, they were just talking about all kinds of crazy things going on. Doors slamming, cabinets flying open, food flying across the room, that shattering, hearing voices, hearing music, things of that nature. And I think they probably moved out, just after a few years and sold the house. So, but I think when we own when we moved the swimming pool, I believe that reopened something.
I'm wondering if it wasn't like some sort of a, I don't want to say like a seal, but like something broke to where
Yeah.
it allowed these things out now.
I think
You
some
disturbed
I think
something.
yeah. I think somebody caught it like a ley line or something one time. I don't know. Um, Sandra Grace introduced me to this woman who clears haunted houses and stuff. And she's like Massachusetts or whatever. And she called me one day and was asking me questions. She said she went to see this lady doing card readings or something. I don't know what she was doing, but she was asking them questions about my property, trying to help me. And the lady had told her to connect and look under the ground for like what you said there, like a crack in the earth's core or something. And, I don't know what she did or how she did it, but she somehow energetically closed that up. And it made a little bit of a difference. I noticed a little bit of a difference because she didn't tell me when she did it. She waited like 10 days and said, "Hey, how are things going?" And I told her, I said, I feel like it's gotten a smidgen better, but it wasn't fixed. But I believe that's what it was because, I mean, the house wasn't super old. I mean, at that point, it's probably like 35 years old at best.
Hmm.
And so, it's not like it was built in 1810 or something, right? But yeah, I think that's what that aspect of it was.
Well, if you would like to, I'm curious now. I want to know how you've managed to get away from all this, and I'm sure the listeners out there would like to know too. So if you'd like to let us all know how you got to the point to where you're at today,
Sure.
we can go into that.
Yeah. Well, I did two exorcisms, one with the priest and one with this minister guy, and that didn't fix anything. But I can tell you this, I can go into detail if you want, but the stuff you see on TV where they throw the holy water on you and it's like it's blistering your skin, that is real.
Hmm.
Yeah, there was a depth of pain I've never ever experienced going through that, and so the medicine woman had said that the house isn't the issue. She said, "I'm the issue. Until we pull the demon out of you, we can't close the portals at the house." So basically, I went up to Abington, Virginia, and we did this rebirthing ceremony, and you know, probably in a short version of that, dug my own grave, laid in the grave for 18 hours, and at some point energetically died, then was reborn. And when I died, my friends had to maintain this sacred fire while this stuff was going on. So, and needless to say, dude, man, I'm a retired Marine. I run a real estate company. This was so far outside of everything in my life I've ever experienced. So, but I was determined to stay alive. But my friend Dee said she's seen this horse-looking thing come out of my grave that had a hoof about 7 inches across, and it had like the head was this demonic thing with horns. And she's like, dude, I mean, it was huge. walked right past her, right through the sacred fire. My German Shepherd, Kennedy, looked horrible. It walked through her, so whatever was tormenting her, it took, and then, it left. And, it's interesting. Lakota, the medicine woman, said when the demon leaves, one of her, cows, I don't know how this stuff works, but one of the cows volunteered basically to take the demon. So she did some prayers, she talked to him, and, she told the cow if you were willing to do it, I think it was to go, like, lay down next to a fence or something, something out of the ordinary for that animal, and it did. So, basically, that animal, chose to be a part of this. And if you look at the Native American culture and stuff, and at a deep level, that's where this medicine comes from. So that demon went to the cow. The cow went freaking nuts, ran through the pasture, broke through the pasture, and I think at some point the cow caught up with a bear on the path. The demon transferred from the cow to the bear, and the bear ran down and ran out in front of an 18-wheeler and got killed instantly. And then the cow came back. I'm like, man, I'm not going to eat that cow if you guys are butchering it. I can tell you that.
Right.
It was so bizarre. It was so crazy, but it took what was inside of me out, and that was there was still there was another 21 days that I had to wait before she could come to the house and fix the house part. And that was really the worst part because I didn't know if it was fixed. I had to wait 21 days. And she came about 30 days or so later. And we probably had 100 hours worth of people trying to fix this house. And she walks up in there and she sings 3 songs. I'm like, "Are you kidding me? You sing 3 songs and it's done." And she just starts laughing. She said, "Wesley, because you've already been fixed. This is the easy part." And so at that point, I waited about 10, 12 days. I'm in real estate, so I was not going to sell the house to somebody until it was fixed. What am I going to, Brandon, let you and your family move in there and not say something, just so I can get out from a payment. I'm not doing that. And so when I felt the house was cool and it was clear, because I looked at the security cameras and there was zero, there was nothing, there was no movement, there was no nothing. And so we listed and sold the house. And at that point, I was pretty traumatized. And I love to say the things that were crawling on me stopped. That took probably another 10 months to fully stop. So they crawled on me for close to 2 years, and, but one of the things, the healers I heard them talking about was that they were Reiki trained. Are you familiar with Reiki?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So, I didn't know what it was. I wasn't necessarily looking to take a Reiki class, but it was weird. I kept seeing this attorney's office sign, and the spelling was almost the same as Reiki. And I'm like, all right, I'm listening. I'll take the freaking Reiki class. And it's funny, after I took the class, that I'd never seen that sign again. I'm like, I mean, did the attorney move? Was that never there? Or was I the only one seeing it? I don't know. But when I took the Reiki class, that's when I realized I had the ability to help heal people. And so as you fast forward over the last handful of years, you know, um, I'm a Reiki master quantum healer. People come to me and I heal them. And, you know, um, we talk about that on the podcast. So the podcast goes through the whole haunted house story, but it also has a twist to it. It's like how life happens for you, not to you. So, how all those things that happen to me could I could go into that as I was victimized, or it happened to me for me to grow and become something different. I'm tired of being a victim. I was a victim my whole life. I was this raped little boy forever, and I joined the Marine Corps so nobody would ever touch me again. and nobody did, but that just I wasn't able to heal that aspect and until I went through this process. And um, it was on multiple levels just some of the most craziest stuff you've ever experienced in your life. But one thing I would like to talk about is I met this priest, Father Munford. He's a former British Royal Marine here in Virginia Beach. So if I'm going to the church, it's bad. So I'm tracking this guy down, and they're like, "Hey, this guy could do exorcisms." And I'd been months and months looking for somebody. So long story short, I go see the priest, and I tell him how furious I am with God. How this stuff is none of it's real. And he says, "Come into my office. I want to do something." So he says, "Son, I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to visualize you being about to be abused." He said, "I want you to go to the point where, I mean, right before it gets bad." And I'm just, you know, dropping the F bomb left and right. I'm crying. I got stuff crawling all over me. I'm desperate, suicidal, basically. I mean, I was just, it was ridiculous. He kept asking me if I was on heroin. I'm like, "Dude, I'm not on heroin. I'll take a piss test if you want." And so I'm like, "All right, Father, I'll do that." So I'm sitting there and I visualized the room. It was a single story house, and it was across the street from my home. And they converted the garage into a poker room. So there's a poker table there. There's liquor bottles there. There's silly pictures on the walls, and it's a guy's game room. And so I'm sitting there, 10, 11 years old, on my hands and knees, and no clothes on, and he tells me to he says, "I want you to look for Jesus." And I remember being so pissed off. I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me, Father?" And he's like, he puts his hand on my shoulder. I mean, I'm like coming out of my skin at this point. He says, "Look for him." So I'm looking in my mind, I'm looking through the room, and there was a picture on the wall. They had this one picture of the wall where they had stupid dogs around the table playing poker, and the one dog's got a card in his paw handed to the other one. That picture has always brought me back to that room. I've hated that picture my whole life. But I said, "Yeah, Father, I see the picture." He says, "No, honey, I want you to look for him." And I just remember, I was just like, I'm just, "What are you talking about?" And when I looked over in my left shoulder behind me, you could see Jesus. And I just remember being so shocked. And I said, "Father, I see him, see him." And he said, "Honey, what did he say to you?" I said, "He didn't have to." And he goes, "Well, why not?" I said, "Because he was crying." And that is the day that I realized Jesus wasn't there to pull me out of the room, Brandon. He was there to love me through whatever I was going through. And, I thought about that and thought about it. And, I don't think I'm a religious person. I do my healing work. I know I work with Jesus. I know I work with angels, but I just don't feel like I'm a religious person. But that made sense to me. I mean, I seen him, and I can walk with my children every day, everywhere, and I stop and look left and they walk and move forward and something happen or they can get sick. You can't save them, but you can love them through everything. And that was a huge change, switching point in my life. It helped me start to heal that little boy. and, start moving forward um, and forgiving myself. I don't know why I felt like I had to forgive him. Sounds kind of silly, but in my mind, I did, but it still sounds silly just to say it. But, there was this level of forgiveness and, this broken man that, at the time I could do anything I want. Dude, I had a big ass house. I had 5 cars, 2 boats. I could do whatever I wanted except for love myself and be happy. And, I wanted to share that because I know there's probably people on the show that have had the same experience. And that's why I hated church so much. I didn't even know Jesus was a Jew. I mean, I knew nothing. And I don't know much more, but I don't need to know much more to do my healing work. Um, but that was one of the most beautiful experiences I had, and there was many of them, but they were very painful, but it was beautiful, and it changed everything for me. I mean, he loved me so much, he came into that vision and showed me him crying why this was happening, and, I'm grateful for that.
So now, with what you're doing with Reiki, how do you end up like for when you're reaching out with people and people reach out to you to communicate with you to try and help them?
Mhm.
For anyone listening, how would they be able to get a hold of you?
Yeah, my website is VB Healer, Virginia Beach Healer. I'm on Instagram, VB Healer. My name is Wes Coons, and my podcast is Enlightenment Unknown: Life of a Spiritual Nomad. So if you want to listen to the whole story, and um, I shared 98% of the story. There are some things that I just wasn't going to share that they did to
Mm-hmm.
me. But it's through the whole story, and then it goes into how life happens, happens for you and not to you when we talk about healing work. And so you could find me on any of those platforms. And I tell people I see energies that no longer serve them. So the things that are blocking you from moving forward, keeping you from becoming the person that you want to be, that's what I see. And I remove that stuff. And I think the biggest thing that I do for people is, when you leave a relationship, there's that sexual energy from that person that's still inside you. And you have energetic cord connections to them. Clearly you're not touched during this, but if it's in person or remote work, it doesn't matter. We call that energy up and we cut it out and remove it so you can heal and move fast, move forward quicker, and you can get your ex out of your life literally because that person, when you have sex with somebody, you share part of your soul with them. And I know how to go in and help people heal from that, and that's the number one thing I do. I've done that 15, 1,600 times easy, and, over the last couple years. So it
Now, I was,
makes life different
yeah, I was gonna ask, like, how often are you being reached out to?
every day, every day. I've got clients in 87 countries now, so, you can do this work long distance. You don't have to be in front of them. I mean, I'm not the one doing the work. I channel the Holy Sacred Spirit. Reiki is channeling the Holy Sacred Spirit to flow through me to through my crown chakra, the top of my head, into my body, into the client. But I also work at a quantum level, and I've just got some very unique gifts. And one of the things I have the ability to do is call angels in and place angels with people, and the angels work on them too. So, I've got I've got there's a Indian culture here in Virginia Beach, and I'm very popular with them. So when their family comes from India, one of the things we do is they bring them right from the airport to my office, and so sometimes there'll be 8 or 10 people, every 8 or 10 hours worth of healing work being done because they want to clear all the energy off of them traveling and all that, and resetting the energy for it being appropriate for them on their vacation for being here for a couple months. It's kind of It's funny because none of them, there's only one of them speaks English, and they just stare at me and let me do the work, but they're really nice people.
Yeah. Well, we can probably wrap this up, but before we do, I was going to say I definitely appreciate you coming on here and sharing that.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
And I'd like for you to let everyone know again where they can find your podcast.
Sure. Enlightenment Unknown, Life of a Spiritual Nomad. You can find it most anywhere. You Google it, it's going to show up. It's on YouTube. It's on, my brain's not even working now after talking this stuff. Any of the programs that carry podcasts were listed.
So pretty much anywhere you find Tinfoil Tales, you can find your podcast.
Yeah, we're on there with you.
Awesome. Well, Wes, it has been a pleasure talking to you.
Man, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for making the time for me and allowing me to be on your show. I really appreciate that.
Not a problem. You have a good night.
You too.
If you'd like to be a guest on Tinfoil Tales, remember to send an email to tinfoiltalespodcast@gmail.com or go to tinfoiltales.com and go to the contact section. Make sure to follow me around on all the social medias. And just remember, truth comes at a cost. Are you willing to pay the price?
I heard a story late last night about something lurking along the wood line. Huge footprints, strange lights in the sky. They claim it's nothing, but I know they lie. It's easier to laugh in my face, but something about this makes me say, what if it's real? What if they knew? What if the answers are coming from you? Spinning stories, wasting my time, hearing voices, is it all in their minds? They can call me crazy, but I just want some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. They see a dog man walking, or maybe a mothman flies above the buried giants, hidden beneath the lies. They say it's just stories, it's all make-believe. Fairy tales for the things we can't perceive. They want to keep us blinded, they want to break our will. But I'm not buying it, I'm not swallowing another pill. Force-fed poison, the lies we're made to believe. What if the truth could set us free? Alien signals traveling through time, secret space programs erasing their minds. They call them crazy, but I just need some proof. What if it's true? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. They laugh, they lie, we all could die, but the signs are there if you open your eyes. Aliens, cryptids, demons, ghosts, the Nephilim too. What if it's me? Or what if it's real? What if it's real? What if it's true? What if the world's not what we knew? Tinfoil tales pulling me in, a story that starts where the logic ends. What if it's real? What if it's true? The answers are waiting, they're waiting for you. It's all in our heads, it's all in our minds. These voices can't be silenced, the truth must rise. Tinfoil tales, it's pulling me through. What if it's real? What if it's true?